Discover prototypical track and turnouts with the Roadmaster series from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Proudly made in the United States, Oak Hill's handcrafted turnouts provide unparalleled detail and accuracy, giving your layout museum-quality track work at an affordable price. Whether fully built or in easy-to-assemble kit form, Roadmaster provides all the details of real track. Looking for a custom piece of track work? Oak Hill can help with custom turnouts, diamonds, crossings, and more. Check out all of their offerings on their website, ohrtracksupply.com. Tully Models is hitting the road. Come see their growing line of industry and mill modeling details from Industrial Modeler Supply and Southern Tier Grain Modeler Supply, July 19th and 20th at the National Train Show at the 2025 NMRA National Convention in Novi, Michigan. Then it's off to the St. Louis RPM, July 24th through 26th at the Gateway Center in Collinsville, Illinois. Stop by and find out how Tully Models can take your layout industries to the next level. For more, check out their website at tullymodels.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com.
ATLP Rewind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Tonight, we get to talk S-Scale again and get an update on the Farlin Terminal from our good friend Mike Ostertag. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ray. It's good to be back.
Good to have you back. I had a blast over on the Second Section podcast. It was about a week ago or so that we gathered with Andy and got to talk rail photography and chit-chatted about a bunch of things. That was an absolute a 3-hour marathon, though. That was, we
could have kept going.
Yeah, we really could have if it wasn't 11 o'clock Eastern and 10 o'clock Central. But we had a lot of fun talking all the stuff, photography, and we recapped our St. Louis trip. You and I spent some time together out there and absolutely had a blast and got to see some really cool layouts. And the one that keeps coming up more and more again is Vic Smith and that experience we had at that layout. That was really cool.
An experience is that is the perfect words to use for that layout. It is. I still don't think I saw every single. Did you see the Abbey Road, the Beatles Abbey Road on that?
No, I missed that part.
In the very far, it's on the very far end. He's got the Beatles crossing the street like Abbey Road. Yeah, that was the first thing I saw. It was fantastic. It's a beautiful layout.
Yeah. And the part that was, and then they brought the RC car out. So they have an RC controller and a 187. I don't know if it was a VW Beetle or something. It looked very similar, or a van or something like that. The VW van or something like that. But that was kind of
crazy.
It was fun to watch. Did you drive it? Did you run it?
No, I didn't want to wreck anything because I want to be accused of breaking something.
Well, somebody was driving it and it got right in, and all I did was I just had this, instinctively stuck my hand out and held it against the fascia to try to catch it just in case the thing went off because it looked pretty wild, but very neat stuff. Very cool layout. Vic Smith's got there. Very highly detailed, very cool, kind of a lounge kind of bar area that goes, it's not a big operating layout as far as like you wouldn't go and do an omp session there, but you'd sit back and sip a beer or two and be able to watch it, and it's just really entertaining.
Yeah, the whole room was just comfortable. It was just kind of a nice place. A lot of mirrors.
Yeah.
Like an old 70s bar. It almost seemed like. You know. But it was great. It's a beautiful layout, and the detailing, the attention to detail that he has on there is just phenomenal. Yeah. And he changes the people in it, which is crazy to me. Like everything, all of it. The people changed with the seasons.
Yeah,
they was telling me. Wasn't they telling you and I about Christmas? Right, about Christmas time, they change certain people and all over the place. I guess he does
all 4 seasons. He'll do Halloween related stuff. He does just a bunch of stuff. So very, very cool layout. Very neat approach to it. Yet another one of those 1,000 doors into our hobby with what Vic's doing with his layout, right?
Definitely.
But here we're here to talk about the Farlin Terminal and get caught up. It's been just about a year or so that you and I have talked, and about that on the podcast, and you introduced us to the Farlin Terminal. But for folks that may have missed that episode, why don't you just give us a little synopsis about the Farlin Terminal and just the grand scheme of what that railroad is?
Okay, so the Farlin Terminal is a terminal railroad, and by that it means it starts at an interchange and it has a physical end. It's about 10. It would, in real life, it would be about 10 to 15 miles long. Small customer base, rickety track. I have it set in the late 70s, early 80s now. We'll get into that here a little bit later. And it's basically designed for me to be able to operate it by myself, kind of unwind, relax, do things, just kind of take some of the edge off and just kind of get lost in doing some operations. But at the same time, you could have a couple of guys down there doing operating sessions as well. And it's going to be small enough to where you could run a couple of sessions in an evening. So it's going to be really, really kind of fun. And that's what I want to go with, is fun, but yet realistic and believable. So that's kind of the best synopsis of the railroad that I can give at this point, because the railroad has changed. So, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So you made a change. You made that pretty public. You've got a Facebook page with quite a bit of following. It's either a page or a group, but nonetheless, you've given social media coverage to this layout. And the biggest of the news, well, two big things that you did. You not only changed the era, you then started completely rebuilding. So the Farlin Terminal we talked about a year ago is kind of a distant memory. And now you have this whole new Farlin Terminal railroad that you're putting together. Let's talk about the era, because you made a huge jump. You basically went Huey Lewis and the News back in time here, and that's all I can think. If we could afford the music, we'd play that right now, but we don't have the budget enough to play it. But you went from 92-93 to 79-80, and I'm sure there was a great reason for it.
Yeah. Okay. So the 92-93 era was meant to represent the time when I first started on the Green Bay and Western, and all of the things and memories I had from that. And in doing so, in having it in that era, it kind of pigeonholed the equipment that I have, and really, really kind of made it a little bit difficult to get certain types of cars that I would have needed to do certain things on the layout. Locomotive wise, I would have been okay still, but everything would have been aged. It would have been old and decrepit and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those engines are awesome. I run one every day almost.
And really kind of the signature of a line like that, right? They run a lot of old stuff anyway. You're not going to have the newest, latest, greatest equipment.
Yeah, exactly. But the biggest issue of having that era is the freight cars that are available in S scale don't match that era necessarily. A lot of things like 40-foot boxcars are gone. Some of the older covered hoppers are gone. Flat cars are relegated into maintenance away service instead of regular general service. So there's certain things that just were a little bit prohibitive with that. I still love that era because of the fact that it's when I got my railroad career started. And at one point I'm 54 years old. Who knows what I'm going to do in the future? At one point I may do something with a different scale, and maybe I can do that era as well as the S scale. So I kind of made a decision to where I think I need to make a change to better fit the equipment that's available. And it actually will give me a broader horizon or a broader selection of things to choose from, and it'll also give my industries a broader scope, because it'll be like the end of the 40-foot era, beginning of the 50-foot era, at sort of type of deal.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I'm actually kind of excited because I've never really played around with 40-foot cars, and they really, really are neat, on a shelf layout, the 40-foot cars really make the layout look much bigger than what it really is.
We don't want to jump around too much, but I think it's now kind of an appropriate time to ask, because you and I have talked before, both online and offline, and we've had this, conversation about how challenging S scale can be, and the things that you're up against. Did this change? Essentially, was that caused by the challenge of finding more modern, or even the selection within S scale?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the change. And for those who didn't hear before, I went from 92, 93 back to 1979 and 1980. And the vast majority of the cars that are available in S scale right now are from the 50s and 60s era, and some freight cars are more modern, but they're from the mid to late 70s era. So those cars would be like lightly weathered or like kind of newer, whereas the older stuff could be modeled and more heavily weathered and available for whatever needs to be done. So it allows me to kind of model within my means, I guess would be a good way of putting it, because I'm not trying to figure out how to create 10 of something that don't exist and most likely will never exist. So it's now I can just go and use what's available models and create from there. Not saying I'm not going to scratch build cars, but I'm just saying that, like, the models, like 40-foot box cars, I have like 8 or 10 of them back here that are doing nothing but collecting dust on a shelf. Now, by moving back to that era, now I can go and do something with them and show them that they still have a revenue life on my model railroad.
It just makes me think, and maybe it should be more of an appreciation for just how spoiled us HO guys are, that we do get such a vast selection. And when you go to make a decision on a layout, whether it be freelance like you're doing or even prototype, there's just so much availability. And it seems like every model that's ever come out of a locomotive is somehow available in HO through one of the major manufacturers. We don't have to have these challenges. And then rolling stock, same thing. And I'm just thinking that, for S scale, it must, really heavily influence not only your decision, but pretty much the entire S scale community, it being that, okay, this is what's available to us. It pigeonholes us between an era. And then, if you want to do modern, you're really pulling out the styrene, and it's 100% on you.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. There are some companies out there who are trying to do some more contemporary things, and they're doing a really, really good job of it. It's just that the numbers are so limited that it's going to take a while for those, I believe, to catch on and to like really start taking off. And I do what I can to try to support anybody that comes out with a new car, if it's going to be something that will actually fit what I'm trying to do, even if it's obscure. There's a company that just came out with, and I don't know if you've ever seen these, they're called a Halliburton vertical covered hopper. They're look like little canisters on top of a flat car, basically, is what they look like. And I'm kind of hesitant because they were kind of for a specific industry, but I kind of want to support the guy too at the same time. So there's a balance right there. And yeah, tell you what, I'm very envious and jealous, but yet my pocketbook isn't, because when I went to St. Louis, I got to just walk around and say, wow, that's neat. Wow, that's neat. I don't need those. I don't need that. Wow, look at this. And if I would have been in HO scale, I would have been broke. I mean, there were so many cool things that were there to buy and to pick up and stuff like that. And I was driving home with Andy, and he was telling me about some things, and I just happened to say, how's your pocketbook feel? He goes, not good. and I said, mine's fine.
Yeah.
mine's happy. But it does, you're right. It does tend to pigeonhole more contemporary modeling. And that goes back to with S scale. For those that aren't familiar, it goes back to Mr. Gilbert back in the 50s and things like that, and American Flyer, and it's kind of really been stuck in a transition era-esque modeling genre, so to speak. And there are some things that are a little bit more contemporary, 60s, early 70s, stuff like that. But I mean, for the most part, you're right. You're on your own for what you want to do. And you do have to be pretty creative. So it did drive the decision. And now I have to, instead of getting rid of and selling things, now I have to find purposes for my things.
Yeah. It's obviously something we talked about in the last episode with Matthew Fricks when he was talking about car routing and the term guardrails, right? When you drill down on an era plus, with Matt, with his car routing and selecting cars, it gets you really good guardrails that your wallet really appreciates, because you're not out there trying to modify to fit the next shiny thing that's available. But on the other hand, I can see him as kind of very narrow guardrails for the S scalers. What is the big gap in S scale that really would help to over? What's the thing that's really missing for S scale to really start to bloom or be a little bit more of a looser guardrail?
Number one, track. Right now, you have a choice between. It used to be Tumalco track, Flex track, and I'm not even sure what it is anymore, or who sells it. And the last time I saw some, it was, from my opinion, it was almost cost prohibitive. It was like $12.50 or $13 for a 3-foot stick.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. And I mean, you think about that. You think if you just want to do a 2-foot wide by 8-foot long deal, I mean, you're going to end up with almost $100 worth of track in that one space. Where, I mean, that's, you're almost better off hand laying at that point. Switches or anything track related is really ready-made track, and I don't mean the snap together stuff like the easy track stuff, which is cool, but if that's what you want to do. But I mean like regular,
like what we're spoiled with, Pico and Atlas and all that. Yeah,
right. Yeah, there is no variety there. And then one other thing would be, with locomotives, you do have an enormous gap. Like there's a GP35 and then there's an SD60. The number of locomotive models in between there are completely void. There are a handful of GP38-2s and SD40-2s that were made in brass. But other than that, yeah, there's not a whole lot out there. Steam-wise, the world's almost your oyster. It's there's a lot of different steam locomotives available in brass and plastic and stuff like that. But and first generation diesels, GP9s, but these companies are going away. They're kind of going away. I mean, Scale Trains has got all of the old S Helper Services stuff, and they're doing an amazing job with what they've come out with so far. But it's still the old stuff from S Helper Services. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
It's not anything, and they haven't come out with a new locomotive or a locomotive yet. So, and that's not a dig on them at all, because at least they're putting something out, which is not like what MTH did, when they had this stuff. And that's the problem. There's been so much drama and wishing and hoping in the scale that one company goes down, it gets passed on to the next, and nothing ever happens. It just seems to change hands. The names change, but the story always stays the same. Nothing else comes out. And things like American Models, I haven't heard anything of a new locomotive coming from them of any kind, a new model of locomotive. They've redone some like paint schemes, which is cool, but nothing that I'm interested in. But I mean, it's for those that are interested in it. They've done a really, really good job. But it's just anything past like 1970 to today is virtually missing. I mean, it's virtually non-existent. So you could pick anything, and I would just say yes.
Yeah, and that's an era now. You know, you talked about Steam, and I think relatability, right? What do modelers of in 2024 relate to, and what are the age brackets? Now, you mentioned your age. I mentioned, I'm 10 years younger than you are. What do you and I relate to? And we got a little bit of a difference, but we didn't grow up in the Steam era. It was diesels, right? And even modern railroading, or even the time eras before the 80s, the 90s, 2000s is what we relate to. That's the stuff we saw. We saw Dash 8s. We saw, the GP38s and the 38-2s and the GP40s and the SD42s. And so as you move away from that era, and I kind of, it's like a sliding timeline, right? It's like what's popular kind of sliding. And as you move away from an era, you think that stuff starts to fall off, the 1800s railroading that not many are modeling. And now the steam stuff goes away and you start to see first generation diesels. And then that starts, and now you've got younger kids that relate more to GEVOs and, the big stuff that they see out on the road. And that's, so this timeline sliding that way, and seemingly S-scale to survive, to make it as a popular scale, needs to also be able to slide with that timeline.
Yeah. And, it's a little bit of an uphill battle because, I mean, the average age is significantly higher, I believe, than what it is in HO scale. And that just goes with, the fact that, it's, how can I put this? Okay. So when I was talking to somebody on the Thursday night at St. Louis, I was talking to somebody and he mentioned to me, he goes, yeah, S scale is kind of the self-licking popsicle is what he mentioned. And I love that phrase. So basically what they're saying is they're not making money, or they're not making any product because there's no market. But there's no market because there's no product.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious circle that you're just constantly trying to go around. And right in the middle of that circle and what's going on are all of these people who unfortunately pass away and their estates become available and they get bought. And so that stuff just continuously gets recycled. But at one point, these kits, whether they're wood or old plastic or whatever, they get to a point where they're virtually unusable. And so how many, the plans that come with them are able to be used, but now you're going back to actually scratch building an entire car. Yeah. So, so in order to create the market that's needed to make the new stuff, you need the market, but to get that market, you need the stuff to attract people into it, but yet to get people in, it's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle, and it's one that I don't see being broken anytime soon. I've always said that S scale needs an Athearn, just somebody to throw a ton of stuff out there and just see what sticks. And because in reality, I really feel like S scale, manufacturing wise, there are a ton of really great manufacturers doing 3D printing and other castings and things like that. But in reality, the equipment is really kind of rooted back in the 60s still. I mean, there's nothing that really comes DCC ready. I mean, Lionel does have one or two things, but that's their own proprietary stuff, and it's their proprietary stuff. So, if I were to get something like that, I'd have to tear all the guts out of it to fit what I'm doing. And, it's just one of those things that somebody needs to come in and just say, well, but to do that, you need a lot of money. What's the old saying, Ray? In order to make a small fortune in model railroading, you need a large fortune or something like that.
Start with a large fortune. That's how you make a small fortune in model railroading. We've had folks on this show. We've listened to Shane Wilson. We've talked to Jim Wigan at Ather, and all those folks, and the challenges of creating and what goes into it. It's not just flip a switch and pump out a product. There's a lot of research that goes into it, and then the tooling and the investment, and you're down, at times they would talk about $250,000 at a time on a product. Does 3D printing, is something you mentioned, does 3D printing start to kind of cover that gap?
I think it's a start. I don't think it's going to be the be all end all of everything when it comes to being able to create what you want when you want. Okay, wait a minute. Rewind that. Take that back. You can, with 3D printing, you can create what you want when you want. However, the amount of time and effort that it's going to require for that to happen is, I mean, I'm working on a locomotive right now that I've been working on for nearly, I'll bet you it's got to be going on 3 years at a minimum. And I finally got to a point where I could test print it. And when I test printed it, I realized I forgot half the details on one side, and I've started laughing. I'm like, great, wow. This is a whole night's worth of work that I'm going to have to do on this one of these days. And I forgot all the door hinges on one side. The other side looks great. Yeah. The other side looks
just run it in that direction, right? Don't ever flip it around. Yeah, just run it in that side. Yeah.
Yeah. You only need to. So, I mean, when it comes to that, you can really, it does open doors, but at the same time, you're still dealing with, I need to find trucks. I need to build a chassis. I need to find a proper drive system. How am I going to do this? How am I going to fasten couplers? How am I going to do? There's a lot of design elements that go into the 3D printing. It's not just print it and go. It's, and I'm talking locomotives. Freight cars, that's a little bit different story. Freight cars, there you've got a little bit more of a window, I think. So I mean, because you can print the chassis and the trucks and all of those things, and all you need are wheel sets and couplers, and you're off and running. But there again, design elements are crucial for it, and getting it a little bit wrong on the computer can turn out to be a lot wrong in the printer. So it's you really need to kind of have your I's dotted and your T's crossed and understand exactly what's going on. So yeah, it's a good stepping stone, but I still believe that manufactured product is still necessary to help kind of bring a cohesiveness to everything that's going on.
Yeah, because I mean, as much as 3D printing is becoming popular, it's still not in everybody's house. It's not like the dishwasher and the refrigerator in people's houses, right? It's right. Still a hobby within the hobby that, again, great. And it seems like the folks that are doing 3D printing, and you kind of hinted at this before, they lean towards the niche, right? Where manufacturing kind of hits the generalized, the things that are going to sell in the masses. 3D printers are like, oh, I want to drill down on this one specific, very odd car because I can, because it's easy to do, or not easy to do, but it's you have the capability of doing that.
Yeah.
But yet, mass producing out of 3D printing doesn't seem to be nearly, one, cost effective, or two, as in going back to the, using molds and producing product that way.
Yeah, it's not just in S scale that the 3D printing is becoming in vogue too. I mean, N scale, for example, you can print a ton of stuff on a plate, on a print plate in N
Yeah.
scale. I mean, the size alone, in N scale, your physical details don't matter as much because of size. I mean, that's been well documented. It's been said time and time again. HO scale, you need to start getting your details. You start getting up in S scale, you need to have your details, right where they're supposed to be, because you can see them once you start painting. You can see, where the rivets are supposed to be. You can see that thing just because of the general size. And then you
Yeah.
get up to O scale, and that's just a whole different world altogether.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I never thought I'd ever get into it, and I'm very much I love it. The thing is, for me, is what I like about the 3D printing the best is the fact that I can create something on the computer, and 10 hours later I have a three-dimensional physical
Tangible, feelable.
tangible thing, feelable.
Yeah.
I can see it in my hand, and then I can look at it and go, I did that. That's cool. Well, now what else can I do? And so, like you said, it's a hobby within the hobby, and it's one that you can really immerse yourself in.
Yeah.
I tend to just use it as needed right now, but I could see myself getting a little bit more involved in it down the road if certain things come to pass.
Yeah, I think it would just be interesting. And then kind of a final thought on this before we get back to the Farlin Terminal is how many folks would actually start to go towards S scale? We have this joke, right? As you get older and even HO gets hard to see. So but the next step, if you're going to go manufacture, is O scale. And now we're talking about, massive stuff. How many would go to S scale instead, or move to a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, if we had even just half the availability, in S scale that HO has?
You hear, and I've heard this time and time again, is this is like the perfect size. It's the perfect scale, but there isn't anything available.
Yeah. Except for cars. You guys got like all the best
Oh
cars,
yeah,
right?
yeah, we do.
Yeah, you get
Yeah, we
everything
do.
in cars. Yeah. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think we were talking about that too
yeah,
in stuff. It's like, oh yeah, if you want a car, if you needed a 1953 Studebaker, matter of fact, I think I have one floating around here someplace.
yeah.
I could just go and buy one.
Yep.
And it's like $20 or $10 or whatever.
Yeah.
Greenlight is an amazing company. They have all sorts of stuff, but yeah, vehicles. We got the market cornered on vehicles. It's just
Right.
it's insane, but that's not enough for to of a draw for people, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
mean,
It's got to be the trains. Yeah.
it's got to be the trains. So I think that if there was half of the available stuff from HO in S, I think you would see. I think that S scale would actually be rivaling N as what the for second place
Yeah.
as availability, especially when you start getting a little older. Your hands don't want to work and do things the way they're supposed to. N's awesome, and the things that they've done in N is amazing. Especially with the mechanisms and the drives and stuff. I mean, it's disgusting, some of the stuff. It's so smooth, so awesome, but it's so tiny.
Yeah.
And I hold an N scale. Even today, I hold an HO scale locomotive in my hand. I have my MP15 AC HO scale right here in my hand. I hold this in my hand. I'm sitting there going, oh, better not do that because I'm going to break something on it, and it feels so small,
Yeah.
whereas there's some heft to it and weight to the S scale and bigger stuff. But I do believe that if there was more stuff there, the market share would be much, much higher.
We can only hope that, eventually those companies that have the capability of looking at a scale and understanding the market better. And, as that timeline slides and you get more younger folks looking at, taking what they are offering in HO and seeing if they can, move that to an S scale capability. So hopefully keep our fingers crossed for you, but get back to the Farlin terminal here. And so you changed your era from 92, 93 to 79, 80. So we talked about that and the guardrails that set up for you, but then you went a little bit farther because I guess you weren't all too happy, right? With what you had and out it came.
Yeah. Okay. So we had some temperature changes that happened, and I quite literally, I tack spiked because I hand laid all my track switches, track, everything is hand laid. And so we had a couple of temperature variations, and I came downstairs one day and I had a couple switches that looked like noodles. And I'm like, this sucks. Now I got to try to figure this out. And I'm like, okay, what do I do here? How am I going to do this? I know it's pressure. It's, something expanded. Was it the bench work? Was it this? Whatever it was. And so I started looking at it, and the more time I was taking trying to fix it, I spent like almost 2 weeks just trying to straighten 4 switches. And one of them I still never got quite to work quite right. The track work was virtually done. For the most part, I had one little 3-foot section left to go. And the problem was it was my fault. It wasn't anything with any of the rail. It wasn't anything with the ties or the spikes or anything. It was the fact that I went and tack spiked curves and tack spiked in the switches to get it up and running. And the thought was I'll go back and do my permanent spiking as I have time. Well, then, like I said, we had those changes and everything got all boogered up. And I started looking at it and I'm like, this is getting really close to being done. Do I want to make a change here, or how am I going to start doing scenery? I had built that bridge. I built a really cool bridge out of wood, and that bridge is actually going on to the new designed layout. But it was one of those situations where, okay, I'm going to start doing scenery. Yeah, but I got all this track work I have to do. What good is doing scenery if the track is looking like crap, and I started going again into this vicious circle of what do I do? Then I started looking at what do I want to put on here for structures? And one of the main industries has always been a co-op or grain elevator type of thing, mostly a co-op and a fertilizer plant. I didn't have any room to do any of it. I had room for maybe if I cut the bins in half and did a couple of, I'd have to finagle things and everything would be up against the backdrop. And to a degree, the third dimension would be really subdued because I would be, instead of being able to see the shape of the bins, it would look like something that was coming directly out of the backdrop. And I just didn't have enough knowledge at the time or still to be able to figure out how to make that look good.
Yeah, half doesn't really work. You almost have to 3/4 it, or you have to you have to be at least over half. You got to let it start to turn back in before you cut it off. I learned that lesson the hard way on mine. And I've learned that from Kevin Tully over at Southern Tier, talking about it. Like I told him, I said, give me half. He goes, you don't want half. You want bins to turn in. He goes, you got to turn them in to get the right dimension. But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a big thing is the scenery and the realization that it really was very compact. And for those of you that don't know, my layout shelf width, I did it all as a shelf width. It was 11 and a half inches wide. It was these particle board shelves that I got from Menards. They were undecorated. I've verithaned them. They were sealed. Everything worked great. I didn't have any problems with any expansion or contraction of the wood, nothing like that. I didn't have any pressure points on it, nothing. It's just that I didn't have any room to do anything. I couldn't get any depth of field with trying to take a picture on stuff. And I was just, And it wasn't that I was trying to build the railroad for photography. It was just that, if somebody wanted to come over and do that, there's no good way for them to do that with that size in that depth.
Yeah.
So I started to kind of rethink things, and I have X-Track CAD, and I started to design little dominoes, so to speak, or modules in 18 inches deep by 4 foot long sections. And I just started to redesign the entire layout, and that's where we're at now. I'm just doing one section at a time. So kind of like the module deal, right? The one module at a time theory.
Let's go back real quick in the process, because I find it challenging even with my layout. And I've mentioned many a times, I highly encourage folks that aren't happy with their layout to be brave and go for it. Right. If you're not happy, make the change, but
Right.
it's easier said than done at times. And I'll admit that, because even my layout, well, I'd love to just go down there and, take the Joe Mame approach, which is just take it outside and burn it and then come back in and start over. Right. But it's hard to be down, and especially you were so close, right? You had some track work. Now you had to make some repairs to it, but you're ready to put some scenery down. And now you're going back to, square one, right? Back to the design, take everything down. And it's a lot of work for you. You're hand laying track. So it must have been really challenging for you to be able to say, all right, I'm going to do it and actually pull the trigger on that.
It was, it was one of those, all right, am I really going to do this? And I looked at it and I'm like, oops. Oh, look at that. That piece of rail came off. Oh, well, I better, just, kind of, you always see the, oops, they dropped something on the floor from, I better pick that up, whatever. It was one of those deals where I'm sitting there going, well, I can't have this. I don't have any of these spikes. Well, I'll just take this out. And the next thing you know, I had a good chunk of the layout taken out. Now, everything I've taken out, with the exception of ties, the rail, and many of the spikes, believe it or not. But I'm recycling a lot of that stuff. So to try to, save a little bit of dollars on it. And
sure.
But on the other side, now I can sit there and go, wow, okay, so it took a long time. Like my section 1 diagram there, it has a diamond. That's where the interchange is on the railroad. I'm actually flipping the entire railroad on its ear. So the whole railroad, the interchange, if you were looking at my old layout, the interchange was on the left. Now the interchange is going to be on the right. And before, the railroad physically ended at that interchange. Now I actually have the railroad going to potentially expand beyond that interchange at one point when my wife and I move here, which is, we're in negotiations on that. But so now the railroad will end at the town and industry. And so it'll be much, which I have no idea how that's going to work out yet. I have no idea what that's even going to look like. I haven't got that far. So, but now I can go, each section is only 4 feet. So now I can focus on that 4 feet and then move on to the next thing. So now my next focus is building section 3 and working on the track work on that. But yet I can go back and start doing backdrop work and stuff on section 1, work on lighting, I've started to scratch build some signals for the diamond, and working with Iowa Skill Engineering at St. Louis is got a automated diamond signaling board that's coming out here that's going to be really focused. My diamond is a dummy track for the alternate main line, and then my railroad is just the only live track, and that's what this new circuit is designed for. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to play around with that, and so now I can go and do certain things and start really getting into what I want the railroad to look like, and I have room. I have 18 inches of depth. I have an extra 7.5 or 7 inches of room to be able to give myself anything that I want in there. And I'm so much happier with the way this is looking so far.
I'm not sure what 18 inches would be, scaled up against HO, right? The 18 inches, but have S scale. So HO, maybe it's the equivalent of being, maybe 12 to 14 inches deep, which
Probably,
which
yeah.
I think is such an awesome depth. And it's achievable, right? It's not this big 24 or U for 30 or whatever it would be, right? It's not this big long reach and you got to put all this scenery in. It drills it in and makes it very accomplishable that you can do that. And what's neat about your approach, we've heard people talk about this one module approach before on the show, and I've heard it from others as well. But what's neat about yours is that there's no track plan. You've left it almost wide open to change at the end. You can make it whatever you want at the end. So you're kind of just developing your plan as you go. I think it's a really cool concept because you don't know what the other end, like you said, if you're going to move in different environment, different room, whatever, that end, if you had that already built, you'd be back to tearing stuff back out again. So now you've got that flexibility to do what you want.
Yeah. And to go along with that, my valance is a lot different than what most people are probably used to, because my valance, I'm cutting a small groove in the back on the bottom of it, and so that the backdrop will slide in and it'll look all pretty and everything will be all nice and it'll look all like it flows properly. But every piece of my valance is the same 18-inch by 4-foot section as the layout below. So when we move, all I have to do is take those pieces of valance, slide them down, put them into the layout where I want them, build track for it, scenic it, and boom, I can expand my layout just by using my valance and then just create a new valance. So I'm building my valance for future layout, for future expansion of the layout, while I'm building the layout right now.
So essentially you're storing your future bench work as valance above your current bench work.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I don't know how or where or what. I just sat there one day and I looked at it and I'm like, how am I going to do this? I'm like, well, I'm going to need bench work eventually. I'm like, well, okay, well, why don't I just make the bench work my valance? Who cares about the lighting right now? The lighting will come later. I'll figure that out as it goes. I'm not going to worry myself about it, but let's make the bench work for the future be up above. So now that way, if something happens, I know that's to the same dimensions as what I have below. Now it's just plug and play and, I got to put a piece of track in here and it's a single track. And, now I can come up with, I wanted to remember that one house. I remember that one house I have a picture of and it wouldn't fit right now. This will be perfect for right in here. Now I can go and build that scene and create that, or, I have a place to put this industry now. Now I can cut a switch in and do this. And so it's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be very interesting because you'll double the size of the layout without having to double the size of the layout, so to speak.
Yeah. I think it accomplishes two things. It avoids the analysis paralysis, right? That, okay, I got to have and figure out my entire track plan before I get going. Before I start putting the first screw in a board, I got to know exactly what this whole thing's going to look like. And you've avoided that. And the other part is you'll learn so much as you go and your mind changes. And then, you fall in love with certain things. This now avoids that basically ADHD kind of thing where it's like, squirrel. And then you can actually incorporate it. You can say, you know what? I've fallen in love with, I don't know, paper mills. I got to put a paper mill at the end of this thing. Maybe it wasn't in the original plan, but now you've got the flexibility to tack it on at some point.
And it's along those same lines. I might start out with a grain elevator thing and say, well, like you said, I might fall in love with wanting to do paper products or something. And I can take those two modules out and put a brand new two modules in. And then I can literally take those grain elevator modules and just create a quote unquote valance out of them.
Yeah.
And put them up there and say, nah, when the grain elevator bug hits me again, I'll take those out and I'll put them down here and all the track will line up.
Yeah. Or maybe farther down the line, I'll tack it on.
Yeah. Or I'll tack it down there. I don't have to get rid of bench work to expand the layout, so it's really, I'm interested personally. I'm really interested to see how this is going to work out because I have no idea. I have no idea. I'm not John Armstrong or anybody like that. I'm just some guy that's got a computer with some little ideas in my head, and I'm trying to do something that I haven't seen really done before, and in a scale that I haven't ever seen it done before. Because a lot of people, like you said, think they have to build the soup to nuts from one end to the other before they start doing things, and I don't have that kind of time to do that. My railroad's only going to be I think it's going to be about 30 feet long in this house. It'll be about 30 feet long. And who knows how far I'll get in the wintertime. Who knows? But it's, I'm excited for it. And I really like the way it's coming together. The story, we always talk about telling a story for the railroad. The interchange now tells more of a story than it did previously. And that's why I wanted to start there, because now you physically can see this is where it's going. You can see the one track, like in section 1 there. You can see up against the wall at the very top of the design. You can see that it's physically going towards the alternate railroad's main line. So that somewhere beyond that, there's a switch and it goes however far. Trains are still not going to be very big. They're only going to be 4 or 5 cars long. But so what? That's what I want.
It's that simple for you. And like you said, maybe an operator or two come over, do some small operating sessions on it. That's perfectly fine. And Mike's referencing some track design drawings that he shared with me, and he's got them on his Facebook page. We're going to share the link to his Facebook page. Plus, we'll share those images on our website, aroundthelayout.com/114 is where you can check those out. And really cool that you're again, the flexibility. And the other thing too, you're a podcaster, you co-host Second Section podcast. And I know this as well, that we meet so many really cool people in our hobby, and we get the opportunity to see some really amazing stuff. And that's also what you're able to do, because boy, we can be influenced. You go, like we talked about Vic Smith, and you see things there, or you go to, other amazing layouts, or we talk to guests and they share their layouts, and the ideas just keep coming in. And then, some that we want to implement. And now you've got kind of a flexibility, if you really fall in love with something, to be able to implement it as well.
It's funny that you say that, because when we were at St. Louis, I had an opportunity to go and actually do an operating session at, it's Illinois Central Layout, and I cannot remember the guy's name, and I feel bad because it's such a well done layout.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure everybody knows Mike was talking about Tony Pellegrino's Illinois Central Golf layout. Back to the show.
His operating plan and his operating scheme and the way he had his things set up, I talked to him for a long time, and there were things that he was doing that I just never even thought of. And I'm sitting here going, oh, that's a good idea. I wonder if I could do that. I'm like, nah, no, that just won't work with what I've got going on. That won't work. If it was a bigger layout, that would be perfect. But for a smaller layout, no, that's just because he has quite an interesting staging setup where it's almost like a directional staging type of deal. And the directional staging depends on what level you're of the railroad you're coming out on. So it's very, very interesting. It's awesome and a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And at the end of the day, that's what I want somebody to come over and just say, I had a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of the Luke Lemons approach. And you got to get Luke on the show one of these days. You'll there's a guy that that has some very interesting ideas as to how layouts should be built. But he just always says, I just want to sit back and watch the railroad run. I built this thing for me to be able to watch run. And it's just the look on his face when everything is going perfect is the big smile, him walking around, big smile on his face is awesome. And that's the feeling I want to get out of my layout is I want to be able to have the big smile on my face and say, I'm really proud of what I've accomplished. And that's, I think that at the end of the day, that's what any of us want to do. Right. I mean, it's just, we're very prideful as a species. So when we do something that's really good and accomplishes a goal of ours, it's okay to say, I did that. And I'm really happy with the way there's nothing vain about saying I did a good job with this. Right. It's just, and that's kind of where I want to get to and stuff. And this is the changes on the layout are definitely going to help make that happen. I know I already have it. So
yeah, you're definitely, I've seen you very pumped up about the changes that you made, and you make a valid point that, we encourage people to build your layout for you, right? You build what you want to do, build what makes you happy. But there's something to be said when you have some folks that come over and they just absolutely love operating your layout too. And they express it, it's just kind of, oh man, that was really good. That was a fun job to do. That was a challenging, but fun job to do. When you get that feedback and that you get those dopamine hits from guys that just love your layout, and it just keeps that flywheel cranking for you. And then now you want to just keep going and continue on with your layout, or maybe tack a little bit more on, or whatever that effect is for you. Certainly is definitely good to get that awesome feedback and be able to make people happy.
And it's contagious, right? I truly feel like it's contagious. Like if somebody comes and sees that you're happy with how things are going, they're going to help be happy. If you show up, or if they show up and everything's, I got this problem, I got this and this and this. Well, right away, they're going to kind of be back on their heels a little bit, waiting for the problems to happen rather than being excited about operating and stuff like that, or watching, or even picking out the visual things. I can remember real quick. I remember when I was in Colorado at the Rocky Mountain train show, I visited the Model Railroad Museum there in Michelle Kempema in Greeley, Colorado, and just watching her and listening to her give our little tour of the thing. She never didn't have. She's a very upbeat individual in the first place. I mean, I don't know if I've never met anybody like that before. It's literally contagious. You can't smile you can't not smile around her. But her enthusiasm was so contagious that it started to make me look at different things on that layout. And I started noticing, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that's cool. Oh, wait a minute, there's that's neat. And that's kind of what I want people to do, not necessarily have a bunch of gimmicky things, but a lot of things that say, wow, that's a great idea. That's a good idea. Where did you get that crossing circuit? Or how did you do that? I've never used a proto throttle before. This is awesome. And I want people to immerse themselves in the experience and have a good outcome at the end of their experience.
Well, I think that's an excellent goal, and I'm sure that you're on your way with your Farlin Terminal and the new approach that you're taking, and doing it a module at a time. Keep that flywheel turning and keep you into it and enthused about it. And your enthusiasm's definitely showing through. Mike, want to thank you for coming on Around the Layout, getting us up to date on what you've been up to, and we'll definitely get you back here, and we'll get more updates as you start knocking those modules out.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me on there, Ray.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. and send us your feedback around the layout at gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.